Thank you very much, Robin, for being here in Valparaiso. It's a great pleasure to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So could you please describe your research field and the motivations behind your research?
Sure. So I call my research field psychedelic science. Some colleagues, for example, in the US, are using this term now as well. I do think it can be a standalone scientific field, discipline, subject of study, because it covers such a range of phenomena, from chemistry, molecular biology, even components of physics, perhaps, up to depth psychology, psychoanalysis, psychodynamic psychology, philosophy, art. Psychedelics really do cover such a range, such that even though, really we're talking about a particular class of drugs, psychedelic meaning mind revealing, that's how we translate it, it does cover such a range of other fields of study. So I call it psychedelic science. And then the motivation there is that in having a class of compounds that is mind revealing and subscribing to that principle that indeed that's what these drugs do, there is a realization that we really have something special, a special tool in science to understand the mind and the brain.
And also you mentioned a possible therapeutical application actually of this type of drugs. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so why would revealing the mind be a good thing, and that's where the therapeutic side of things comes in that we have evidence now that if people experience insight, psychological insight, emotional insight, even philosophical insight under the drug during their psychedelic experience or indeed afterwards, then they do well. Their psychological health does better. And classic psychotherapies are essentially insight-based therapies. That's what psychoanalysis is. It's saying that in dreams you might learn some stuff. If you lie on a couch, albeit for a couple of times a week for 5 years or something, you might learn some stuff. And if you do it with an expert who knows knows a map of the mind and the human condition, then they might be able to help you understand some stuff through interpretation, for example. So, an insight-based psychological therapy has a long heritage, and that's what psychedelics are about therapeutically.
Yeah, and you have conducted research in this field actually to treat depression. So can you comment briefly on that?
Sure. So we've completed one study and we've just started another one looking at psilocybin for depression. Our first study looked at treatment-resistant depression. So these are people that might have had their depression for 20, sometimes 30 years, and have tried, the full range of different potential therapeutic interventions, usually drugs, often lots of drugs. Some people have tried 11 different drugs that hadn't worked. Most of them had tried psychotherapy that hadn't worked. And so we saw some really exciting findings. We saw about half of the sample being depression-free at close to 1 month post-treatment. Some of them staying well, they're still well, having their lives entirely turned around, back at work, back engaging with family and such like. So it can be a really profound shift. And it's given us so much confidence that we're now testing it against the best drug treatment that's currently available, an SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. These are Prozac-like drugs. So we're giving it a proper test now.
And how do you see the future of this research field in the possibly in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years?
Yeah. Well, all I can say is we're on the right track to psilocybin becoming a medicine. And whether that happens in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, there's a feeling that it's a logical inevitability that this does work, that it may well be better than the best treatments that are currently available, just as safe, if not safer. And so it's just a matter of time now. But I also know that there's a reality that in the public's view, to a large extent, psychedelics are drugs. Drugs are bad. So it's going to require a fair amount of education, really, and responsibility on the part of media reporting and such like, so that the scientific work can break through some of that stigma and tell a story that's more accurate.
Thank you very much, Robin, for visiting us, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me.